Okay, today we're going to talk about a type of SAT math question called a line story. The SAT loves for you to understand the relationship between a textual description of a given situation and the kind of line equation or graph that could be made out of it. Sometimes they will give you the description of the situation and ask you to create the equation or the graph out of it. Sometimes they will give you the equation or the graph and ask you what it means in terms of the story. So before we get into one of these, let's remind ourselves a couple things about a line. Every line can be expressed in a slope-intercept form, which we remember as being y equals mx plus b, where m stands for the slope, which is the rise over the run, and b stands in for the y-intercept, the place where the line crosses the y-axis, where x equals 0. Two important things to remember about a line. So let's take a look at a line story question. We can recognize it because, like this, it has a story about a situation, and we have a line graph. It says the line graphed in the XY plane below models the total cost in dollars for a cab ride, Y, in a certain city during non-peak hours based on the number of miles traveled, X. According to the graph, what is the cost for each additional mile traveled in dollars of a cab ride? And they give us this graph. Now, the first thing we want to do when we see a story like this is we want to look for words like rate or per, one unit per another unit, for each or for every. Something like Mary earns $20 for every hour that she works at the store. So do we have something like this in the story? Indeed we do. We can see it there in the question. What is the cost for each additional mile traveled? Now, when we see these words, we know that they're talking about the slope, the rise over the run. They're talking about a rate of change. So what we want to do is take a look at the graph they give us and find the slope of this line. How do we do that? Well, we know that we can pick any 2 points on the line to find the slope. And when we're looking at a graph like this on the SAT, we want to make really sure that we pick points that aren't right in the middle of the grid lines here somewhere. We want to pick a point where the line goes right through one of these grid intersections. So we know that it's very clear that the line is passing through one of these points. So let's pick these 2 points. We'll pick point 1.5, meaning that when the cab has traveled 1 mile, the trip costs $5. And our second point will be 2.7, meaning that when the cab has traveled 2 miles, it costs a total of $7. We can find the rise over the run between these 2 points by calculating how far it goes up. It goes up 2, and it goes over 1, and we have found our slope, which is the rise divided by the run, which is 2 over 1, which is 2. So we know that the slope is the rate, in other words, the cost per mile. So if our slope is 2, we know that the cab ride costs $2. Now, we've solved this question, but let's take a look at another feature of a line story, because you might get a question that involves this. You might see words in the question like starting point or an initial charge or a flat fee, like the plumber charges a certain number of dollars just for coming over to the house to do the job. So when we see words like starting point, initial charge, flat fee, we know that is the y-intercept. What's the y-intercept again? Yep, of course, it is that place where the line crosses through the y-axis, where x equals 1. And we remember that our line can be expressed in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. And we know that the slope of this line is 2, and we can see that it crosses through the y-axis there at 3. So this line's equation is y equals 2x plus 3. Now, to bring it all back home, what does that mean in terms of? That's right, it means that the initial charge for the cab is $3 and it costs $2 for each mile traveled. And that is a line story on the SAT.